Hi, everybody, and welcome to Awaken to Your Soul Path. I am your host, Barbara, and today I am joined by the amazing AmyLee Westervelt. And we are going to talk about a very special topic today. We are going to talk about the villain blocks. And the first time AmyLee told me about the villain blocks, I was immediately intrigued. I thought, ooh, that sounds cool. So stick with us. We're going to explain what they are, and we're going to talk about how you can recognize them and all sorts of other juicy bits. But for right now, welcome, AmyLee. I'm so happy that you're here today on the show and that we're going to talk about this awesome topic.
I'm so grateful to be here, Barbara, especially seeing as how many times we had to make this happen, right? Like all the times of the missed connections. It's just we were tenacious and we're making it happen. So I'm so excited. I'm bringing all of the energy, as I know you are too.
Exactly. I think just before maybe our audience was not ready for the things we have to share, right? Or maybe we needed some more expertise to be able to share. I don't know. But today the stars have aligned. We are both here and it's showtime. So yes. Well, maybe just let's dive right in, right? Because I can imagine that the people that are watching and listening are just like me thinking, ooh, villain blocks. Interesting. What are they?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I am imagining that I've listened to some episodes of yours, and I know that your audience is aware of things like the universal laws, specifically the law of attraction. That's the one that seems to be the one that gets all of the publicity, right?
Yes.
And so just to kind of refresh everybody, the law of attraction is based on the creative process. The creative process is made up of three different parts: ask, believe, and receive. So ask for what you desire, believe that it's on its way, and open the gates to be able to receive what's coming. So the villain blocks have to do with blocks that are created in the way of following this creative process. And the way to find the villain blocks is to simply add the prefix or the beginning words, who am I to? When we add who am I to ask, believe, or receive, we end up with the villain blocks. The reasons why, well, let me go back for a second. So I believe, and I think you believe too, that we are infinite potentialed spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
And so if we're infinite beings having a human experience, how is it that we can't create everything that we desire? And the answer is we can, but there are blocks that keep us from creating these things for ourselves. And what I came to realize, partly through a download and partly through 40 years of, struggle, right? I have the gate of struggle in my human design chart. That's one of the ones that I'm very good at. I came to realize that it's almost as if like we're walking along on the path of abundance and there's a string on our sweater that gets stuck and it's slowly holding us back. So what happens is you get out there, you go into, you do the classes or the coaches and you get like, yes, I'm going to create everything I desire. And you've got this track on the top of like, I'm going to get abundance and I'm going to do these things and I'm going to make all this magic happen. But deep down, there's limiting beliefs that say, oh, that's not for me. Oh, I'm not meant to do that. Oh, we can't really do that. What happens if we do that? And those are the villain blocks. So the villain blocks is like another frequency that's going on underneath your initial frequency of excitement and exuberance. And yeah, I deserve that. What's actually holding you back underneath? So
like the inner saboteurs.
Yes, absolutely. Very much so.
Yes. No, I recognize that because if you are a little bit familiar with the law of attraction, then you've probably heard about Esther and Jerry and Abraham Hicks, or maybe Bob Proctor and the things that he's teaching. And then, if I keep my thoughts positive and I use affirmations and I do journaling, then I am on the right track. And then magically everything I want will be here. And if you are like me and like you, then you've tried this and it's not working. And then we come to the villain blocks, right?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about the villain blocks, we're talking about the specific limiting beliefs that keep us from aspiring to more, that keep us from asking for what we desire, that keep us from believing that we can have it, and that keep us from receiving it. So if it's okay with you, I could kind of go into them a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So remember, we said ask, believe, receive. So now we're adding the prefix of who am I? So who am I to ask? This one is really tricky. And I had such a ball really kind of digging into this concept. But in society, and when I say society, I mean worldwide. It's not just an American thing. It's not just a Western hemisphere thing. We're talking about the whole world. We've kind of got two schools of thought. We've got ask culture and we've got guess culture. So ask culture are people who come from cultures where it's a little bit more forward. Okay. It's a little bit more of a go-getter situation. It's expected that you ask, and the worst thing somebody can say is no.
Yeah.
However, there's a whole other side of that, which is guess culture. Now, I happen to come from guess culture. Guess culture is more of a passive aggressive, only making your needs met when they're emergent. Otherwise, having needs at all is considered rude. It's considered forward.
Yeah,
And so
you don't talk about it, you don't acknowledge them, you keep them secret, you don't share them. Yes.
Exactly. So if you and I were in a car together and I was cold and I'm from guest culture, I might just sit there and shiver until you say, do you need me to turn the AC down? To which I'd be like, oh yeah, can you a little bit? Whereas a person from ask culture would go, can you turn the AC down? I'm freezing, right? Now, to somebody from guest culture, that would be like, wow, like,
Ooh, yeah.
I guess so. And to someone from ask culture, they're like, yeah, absolutely, no problem. So just that alone, when we come to this idea of who am I to ask, right? Like there are children starving in Africa. There are people that have so much less than you do. And society has taught us that the moment that you are no longer in danger, you need to turn around, catch your breath, and help somebody else up. There is no expectation of equilibrium when it comes to society. The crab's in the bucket, right? Like when you've got like a crab that's crawling, it's like, oh no, you don't get down here and be miserable with the rest of the crabs. So people are very scared to ask for what they desire, because if they do, other people are going to be like, look at her. She thinks that she gets to eat 2 zucchinis instead of 1 zucchini, right? And so this is something that it causes people to be afraid to even ask for what they desire, because they feel like, I already have so much. I call it stuck but not starving, right? Like it's like all my needs are met. I'm certainly not struggling to pay the bills, but the fulfillment isn't there. And if you look at, especially with people who are wealthy, people who are wealthy are not allowed to have colds. They're not allowed to get flat tires. Like nobody wants to hear about your problems when you have a certain level of income, right? So in order to aspire to more, you've got to overcome the idea that asking makes you the villain. Right.
And also that it's not selfish, because that's the other part. What I see with a lot of people, they feel that if I ask for more money, or if I ask for a bigger house, or if I ask for more clients, or if I ask for a family, a child, a lover, whatever, then that's a negative thing, right? Then you're being too self-absorbed or too selfish, and that's frowned upon, because you don't ask. You need to be satisfied with what you've got.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. And it also creates another block, which is more of like a judgment block, where when you have grown up in guest culture, right, and you see people who've grown up in ask culture, you have this, it's not on purpose, but you get this like almost like an anger that they have the courage to ask and you don't. Okay. Yeah. So when we see jealousy and cattiness in the coaching industry, what we're really saying is, you know, like, look at her. She asked people to get on her email list, or she makes millions of dollars because she asked for the sale and you didn't. So a good example of this is like, if you're at a sporting event or something like a kids football, you know, game or something, and you see somebody who walks by with a handful of ice cream sandwiches and there's like 20 of them, and you look over at your friend and you're like, look at her, she just took 20 ice, like oh my gosh, like how much of a glutton can you be? And the woman over hears you and looks at you and goes, they told me the freezer was broken and they asked me to get as many as I could and hand them out to the audience.
Yeah, because that's indeed what I wanted to say. It's not just that you're sort of jealous that people have the nerve to ask about things, but it's also the judgment of what might others think about me when I ask for what I want. How is that perceived? It's always two sides of a coin.
Right, because if you're seeing that in them, then you're seeing that in you. Anything that you're judging in someone else, you're inadvertently judging inside yourself, because you wouldn't be able to recognize it in them if it wasn't going on inside of you. So you're just as afraid. And when you see them do it, it's like, well, how come she has the courage to do that? Well, how come she can do that? Because deep down, you're like, I don't have a right to do that. Right? Like, I'm not allowed to ask. So that's the first villain block. And a lot of people have the opportunity to overcome that block, to be like, you know what, I'm just gonna ask, right? Like, asking is the easiest one, I think. Like, it's just, I'm gonna make the list and I'm gonna manifest and I'm gonna make my gratitude list and all the things. And usually people can get through that one. The tricky one, though, is when we get to believe. So remember, ask, believe, receive. So the second one is, who am I to believe? Now, this one, I'm actually pretty proud of the way that I unraveled this one, because I think that when people can figure this one out, they're like mind blown. That it's an easy one to fix, but it's not an easy one to see. So when we're talking about believing, we want to understand that belief is the strongest emotional attention that you can give something. Okay. There's hope, which is like, I mean, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, like, I'm divorcing myself from the outcome.
Yeah.
And then there's belief. Like, I know. Okay. So what happens in society when you go around telling people that you know something? What do they call you?
A know-it-all.
A know-it-all. Exactly. So when you are like, I'm going to make $10,000 this month, and you're absolutely sure of that, that turns people off, because being sure about something looks like you're conceited, looks like you're a know-it-all, looks like you have it all figured out and you're throwing it in everyone's face. When you're confident, right? That's when, again, you come back to that. Now you're in that second paradigm. You're coming into that ask culture, right? Where you're like, I know this is going to happen. I know that if I put my mind to it, and what happens, people go, well, look at her. She knows what she's doing, right? And it's like, there's this, now that may not actually be happening to you, but that's what you would do. And so that's what you're reflecting. So I have this saying that people would rather be poor than be sure. You don't want to go out there and attach yourself to an outcome, because if it comes true, what happens? Everybody's looking at you, right? It's like being the teacher's pet, but like the universe's pet. So when it's hope, it's like, well, I mean, I'd love to have a $10,000 month. I mean, if that's in the cards, that would be great.
Yes,
and so I always like to
given to me, or if I can be lucky enough to receive it by some miracle.
Exactly. And so that's why I always say that hope is faith without the balls. Hope is faith without actually having any skin in the game, right? It's like, I know that this is going to happen, except I don't know. And if it doesn't, it's not my fault. And if it does, you can't blame it. Exactly. It's like winning the lottery, right? It's like, I mean, I hope it happens, but I'm not actually going to energetically sign off on this happening.
That's the que sera. Whatever will be, will be. It's like it's bordering on the victim mentality, right? Where you're giving away all of your power and then hoping that some benevolent force or something is having a good day and is granting you whatever that you're desiring.
Right. And society loves that. Society loves it when you just put it in their hands. Like, absolutely, you are so oppressed and everything is so bad, but stick with me, vote for me, let me take care of you and I will make sure that you never have to make another decision again. And so they abdicate a lot of their power in favor of not having to be seen as the villain by society. Right? Like there are people that would rather be on the bottom rung of poverty and take a chance of somebody not liking them or somebody, like the people that are billionaires and millionaires and multimillionaires in the world, they can't have these blocks because if they did, they wouldn't be able to have the wealth and the abundance that they have. It would literally be energetically blocked. So they have to overcome this, which also means that they appear not to give a crap what anybody else thinks, right? And so what do we do with that? Well, look at him. He doesn't care. And he's just over there making all this stuff and making all this money, right? Because
judging.
Exactly. Because in order to have this level of wealth, he can't entertain this block that you're really attached to.
No, exactly. And most people are not even aware of this, because if you give them the choice, would you rather be poor and be liked by everybody, or would you rather take a chance and be rich and also be liked by everybody? Then of course they will choose take a chance, be rich and be liked by everybody, right? But that's usually not the way they see it or the way they perceive it. And that's a big part of the problem.
Exactly. So once you can get to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm going to stand here and say that I'm making this happen. I am affirming that this is my reality. End of story. And if you don't like it, oh, well, there's the door. Unfollow me. And you'll notice that when people move from, hey guys, I'm running a business to, I just had $100,000 launch and I'm going to do it again, they lose a lot of people who say that they've changed or they're not the same person. Why? Because society does not like it when you're certain. And so a lot of us, if we get through the ask block, we get stuck on the believe block, because like, what if it doesn't? What if I proclaim this? What if I put all my eggs in this energetic basket and then it doesn't happen? And somebody's standing there going, I told you it wasn't going to work. Look at her. That's why we're all terrified to have failed launches. Right? Because we're all growing under a microscope. And when we're talking about how great our program is and all of the testimonials and all the ways it's going to work and nobody shows up, and you're one of those people, I don't do this anymore, but back in the day, I used to make a welcome graphic for every single person that would come into a new program of mine, right? And like, what happens when there's no welcome graphics? That means she didn't have a good launch. That means she expected this and it didn't happen. And ha, ha, ha. First of all, no one thinks like that. Right? Like, nobody's doing that to you.
Your brain that things like that.
But you're terrified. I mean, you would rather, you'd rather have 0 people in a program than just one person, right? Like that's the worst, is when you've got one sign up and it's like crickets. It's the worst. Why? Because you have someone watching you when you said that something was going to work and then it didn't. And then you're like, oh, I put all my eggs in this basket. And so we've got to get
on a group program with only one person.
Yeah. And you're just like, hey, well, this isn't, because what do? You can't all of a sudden charge them for one-on-one private, support. No. But at the same time, like, what are you going to do with one person? It's not a group dynamic. And so it can be very frustrating, but that is the block that I feel like most people struggle with. They don't want to be seen being successful. They don't want to be seen being confident, because that's that tipping point where all of a sudden it went from I'm cheering for you. It's like, okay, in the United States, we have the New England Patriots. It's my home football team. For the longest time, they were the biggest underdog. I mean, like anybody could beat them, right? Like they were just awful. And then they became a dynasty. In 2001, they won when the 9/11 thing happened and they were red, white, and blue and everybody loved them. And it was like, the Patriots won. And then they just started winning and winning and winning and winning. And the exact same team, suddenly it was, well, they're cheating. Well, they did this. Well, they did that. Well, because this exact same underdog of a team that everybody loved, that was America's hometown football team, became this evil enemy that everybody wanted, anybody, as long as it's not the Patriots. I hope they beat the same team right? And why was that? Because they started winning, and people don't want you to keep winning. They want you to do well, but never too well, and definitely never better than they are.
No, 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 God forbid. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic when you finally realize how it's working, and I recognize everything that you're saying. It's definitely something somebody is struggling with. Yes.
100%. And then if you can get through those two, pat you on the back, then we've got who am I to receive? Now you're calling in all the abundance, you're ready to go. But when it comes to, it's like you've got two people with machine guns standing at your door, and there's people walking up the street with bushels of abundance, and you've got these sentinels that are like, nope, you're not getting in here. Right? Because who am I to receive? I stole a pack of gum when I was 7. I told my mom I hated her when I was 12. I did whatever when I was young. And we take all of these things as evidence of why we're not allowed to have what we desire. Not to mention the fact, when you think about the way that wealthy, successful, abundant people are depicted in society, in media, in movies, what do they look like? They're always gorgeous. They're dripping with diamonds. If they're a man, they've got the slicked back hair, right? They've got an army of foot soldiers. They've got a mansion. You never have the bad guy living in a shack. You notice that? You never have the bad guy looking disheveled. Like, he's always the one that he's dressed to the nines. He steps out of his Maserati and looks at his Rolex and, shoots you between the eyes with his special gun. It's always, it's synonymous, like money and evil. Like, if you have, that means you took it from someone else, right? So the idea of receiving is absolutely terrifying. Why do people who have millions of dollars have security and alarms and all of, big walls around their house?
They're afraid of losing everything that they're having.
Right, because they know that society does not look well on people who have. Now, for some reason, and I don't know why this is, when it comes to celebrities like musicians and stuff, something, maybe because they feel like their craft is what paves their way, right? Like, because they're giving their music or something happens, and there seems to be a disconnect where they don't seem to have this as bad. But then again, maybe they're just really good at hiding it. So when you've got these other two things under control, you know what you want, you're ready to claim it when it actually shows up. When you've got 5 trucks of fan mail coming to your house every day, it's like, oh my gosh, like, stop. Right? And so we have a tendency to block the receiving. Like, when you start getting client after client after, oh my gosh, I'm making so much money, your brain's going to go, but what does that mean? Does that mean we have to pay more taxes? Are people going to notice? And so you'll notice a lot of people will kind of go way up, and then they'll kind of stop. And then all of a sudden it'll go down again, or it'll just plateau because they can't handle receiving that much. If you look at people who win the lottery, most of the time, people who win the lottery lose it within 2 years. Why? Because they are not adapted to the identity of a person who has that level of money. So you give them all that money, and their brain's going, that's not me. That's not me. I don't know how to do that. And they're just dumping it out because their money container isn't calibrated to hold that level of money.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the key is to expand your container and that is not something that goes, you cannot go from poor to rich in one day. It's very difficult to expand your container in that width in such a short time. So usually it goes in increments, and it has also to do with your personal development, right? How you heal yourself, your shadow work that you're doing, the limiting beliefs that you're finding, the limiting beliefs that you're blasting, that you're turning around, so that you can get used to the idea, well, maybe I am someone who could earn a lot of money. Maybe I am someone who could be very famous. Maybe I am someone that could live in a house like that or could have a partner like that. You need to expand your container, and that's usually a step-by-step process, right?
Absolutely. It's like if you're scaling a mountain, right? Like if you're going to climb Mount Everest, they literally have camps where you have to stay for a couple of days just to acclimate to the elevation, because if you don't, you end up with elevation sickness and you could die. So there's no prize for racing up Mount Everest. You
No.
need to take time to calibrate. And, people will say, okay, well, what about quantum leaps? Well, quantum leaps also come with quantum calibration, right? So like if you're going to do something that's on a different playing field and a different, quantum field, you're also going to have to energetically up level at that level too. So you have to understand it's not just going to be your money that quantum leaps. It's got to be your mindset. It's got to be your money container. It's got to be your confidence. It's got to be all of those things in tandem, because if it's any one of them, what's going to happen, the rest of them are going to pull it back down. And you can absolutely have a fluke. A lot of people are like, I had $100,000 a month and then I didn't make money for 3 months. Why is that? Because you didn't calibrate to that energetic level. You jumped up there, right? You got up on a stool and you stood on your tippy toes and you made it happen, but you didn't do it energetically. And so it's not going to stay at that level. And that's why these blocks are so important to deal with. Because when you do that and that underlying current is gone, now the sky isn't even the limit.
Exactly. That's comparable to when you do a crash diet, and you will lose the weight and you will become skinnier. But then as soon as you realize that this is not a sustainable diet and that you get cranky because you're withholding all of your favorite foods and you can never do a glass of wine or something else, then you start feeling resentment, and then you stop with the crash diet and woof, you gain the weight back. And that's because you didn't change your lifestyle. If you do a lifestyle change where you decide to eat healthier and be more active and gradually lose the weight, then you will keep it off because you've adjusted your lifestyle to the figure that you're wanting to have, and you were willing to make sacrifices or changes or whatever is necessary to adapt a lifestyle that brings you what you want to see in your reality. And that's the same with these things. You have, hopefully, and if not, then reach out, a vision of what you want for yourself, something that's the ultimate goal or the thing that really makes you happy. But in order to get there, there are certain steps that you need to take. And along the route, there are certain actions and things that you need to do to either heal yourself or clear yourself or free yourself or stop weighing yourself down, so that you can rise up through the levels until you get where you want to be, much like adjusting your lifestyle to the figure that you want to have instead of doing a crash diet.
Absolutely. Exactly. Right. You've got to calibrate. The calibration is the key. And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong, because they're like, oh, she's doing that. Like, I want to do that. And then when they don't get there, it's like, but she's been calibrating to that for a while. Like, go back and look at our highlight reel. There's a couple of Facebook groups that I'm in with high profile coaches. And one of my favorite things to do is to just search the names of people that I know are making 7 and 8 figures and look at their first couple of posts. They were like, baby deers too. Like, they're walking around, like, trying to figure it out. Everybody has that, and everybody has their own calibration to do. And it's just a question of like, are you willing to put in the work, or do you want that, like, almost like a glucose spike, like what you're saying with the diet? Do you want it to go up and then down and then up? And like, do you want that whiplash roller coaster feeling? Some people do. Some people live for that level of adrenaline. Some people are more, wanting it to be more even keel and steady, and at least be able to, like, to depend on it. And it really depends on kind of like what that looks like for you. But the biggest thing, like I said, is recognizing all of that inner junk that's causing you to have results that may not be in alignment with what you think you desire.
Exactly. And so I can imagine that the people that are watching and listening, because this was also a question that I had when I was starting out, is why do I have all this junk? Where does all of this junk come from? Why do I need to calibrate? Why do I need to, why can't I just think, well, I've gotten very clear on my big dream and I'm ready, so go, and I'm there.
Well, I think a lot of it comes from well-meaning adults. A lot of it comes from parents and coaches and teachers and former partners and people who live in a very different paradigm where we were in a very different societal expectation. You know, we had, if you look at spiral dynamics, we've gone through so many different iterations of like the cave days. And then, you know, we had like the theocracy where everybody believed in one, you know, everybody in an area believed in one God, and that one God was in charge. And then we went through our entrepreneurial phases, and we're coming into what I like to call the collective individualism. And so what that means is that now we're at a place where we're understanding that each one of us has unique gifts, and it's time to plug those unique gifts in to each other to create a better world for the collective. It used to be that individualism was like, we don't do that, we don't talk about that. I mean, you look at that new Threads app, right? Baby boomers could not handle the Threads app because all it is just spewing your personal information, and the baby boomer society is like, we don't do that. Less is more.
Don't talk about your dirty laundry. You don't air it. Yeah. We don't need to connect with other humans. We just need to get as far ahead in our life so we can create something for our legacy. And that's all we have to do. And now we're realizing that there is a spiritual connection that transcends what's going on the earth plane, right? Like we've got quantum relationships that span, you know, generations and multi-generations. And we understand that that wasn't necessarily what they understood. So their well-meaning advice and their, you know, let's look at a couple of them. So if we look at ask, right? It's like, you know, money doesn't grow on trees. There are people that would die for what you have. You should be grateful, right? Like there's some of those right there. When it comes to, believing, right? Like, well, okay, well, I wouldn't put that out there. You know, if you don't want to see it if you wouldn't put it on the front page of the newspaper, then don't say it there. What
you know,
you think,
right? People are going to think that you think you're better than them. Oh, take that down. You know how many times my mother has messaged me and been like, oh, why are you putting that on social media? Because I'm 8 years old and I can't.
Yes, exactly. Or ones like, if you're not successful, you need to work a little bit harder because you're not trying hard enough yet. Or
right.
Like that.
Hard work is such a scam. If hard work was what made you a millionaire, then waitresses and janitors would be millionaires, right? Who works harder than them? Who works harder than them? So why are they not getting ahead? Because it's not the I don't want to say the lies, but I gotta say the lies we were fed by well-meaning adults.
I call them the rules, the bullshit rules of life, the rules. It's about the way things are supposed to be. And those are the things that have been handed down from generation to generation to generation. So there are societal expectations, there are family expectations, and there are a lot of things about, well, it's always been done this way. But if you want to make an oven dish and your mother taught you to do it this way, that's not the only way. You can make a whole lot of other oven dishes, or even the same one, maybe with different ingredients or mixing them in a different way. So what worked for them doesn't necessarily have to work for you. But meaning well, I believe everybody means well. They instill these pressures or beliefs on you about how you should act, how you should behave, how you should look, what you should say or what you should not say, or how you should run your business, or all of these things. And they might be true for them. They also might not be true for them. And they might definitely not be true for you. But it's your job to research them to see if is this true for me? Right.
Absolutely.
Your truth, but is this my truth?
Right, exactly. I mean, to use a little bit more of a morbid example, I read an article a couple months ago that basically said, and you're going to be mind blown when I tell you this, children did not exist until the onset of Christianity. So what that means is that their society before then, when you made a baby, when you had a person, you grew it up so that it could work for you, so that you could exploit it in ways that we won't discuss in your podcast, so that you could use it to further your life. It wasn't about legacy. It wasn't about child rearing. It wasn't any of that. Sometimes if you didn't have a lot of money, you could potentially, sell it for something, or you could, I mean, they were an asset, right? That you owned. And it wasn't until Christianity where Christianity said, hey, wait a second, if we can create a relationship, we can tether these people to the church, because we're going to tell them that, well, your legacy, you've got to be there so Junior grows up in the church. And suddenly we had this idea of these children, and I believe the children are the future, and the children. But until then, they didn't even exist. So knowing that, thinking about how far beliefs have come, it's a lot easier to say, oh my gosh, like, I'm throwing everything that you said out, right? Yeah. And again, the baby boomer generation saw their entire reality implode when we had the pandemic, right? Because like, no more 9-to-5 jobs. Everybody's connecting on technology, which some of them didn't even, and again, I know there's young baby boomers and older ones, but I'm talking about the generation that was in their potentially 50s before technology even came to the zenith that it's at now, where it's absolutely solidified into society, you know, especially social media. And because of that, we've got to honor them for what they did share and how they supported us and the ways that they helped us, heaven forbid, know how not to raise our children. And in the ways that they were, you know, that they were resilient and all of those things. And that's great. But we also have to remember that we've now inherited this planet. We've inherited this, this dimension, and it's up to us to create, you know, the truths and the knowingness that we can pass on to our children, that they can then take and leave what they want. Because maybe things will change, and maybe, you know, the dynamic will be different at that point. And everybody's doing the best they can. And so when we throw out these limiting beliefs from our elders, we're not throwing them out with the elders. We're not saying, my mom ruined my life. It's like, you know what? No. Just like I don't wear the underwear I wore when I was 5 years old, doesn't mean it wasn't good underwear, right? Princess Jasmine underwear was very cute at the time, and I loved it, but I've moved on. And so allowing ourselves to take a deep breath and let go of the limiting beliefs and hold on to the loved ones who instilled them in us, I think is the first step.
Yeah, I agree. It's not about dissing your elders, your parents, your grandparents, but it's about freeing yourself from whatever it is that you need to free yourself from to step into the person that you need to be right now, whatever that looks like. And it's not a jab or a complaint about or towards your parents or towards the people that raised you, teachers or stuff. Exactly. And you also brought up another really interesting and great point, because it's not just family beliefs or societal expectations, but it's also past lives and ancestral things that we are having, collective things that go well beyond just your family dynamics. So there's a lot at play, and only recently it's becoming more and more known what is included in everything, out of how many parts we consist and how many things influence us. It's only recently that they discovered that what we think alters us on a cellular level. If you said that in the age of my parents, they would be like, no, just no, that's not true. And now we know it is. So there's a lot of changes, there's a lot of shifts. And if we want to move with it, so if we want to effortlessly flow along the river of life towards where we want to be heading towards, then we need to do whatever we need to do to allow us to effortlessly float in that direction.
Absolutely. 100%. Right. And the beauty part is that we are. We may not have the feeling that we are, but our higher self is in control. Our higher self knows if we don't hit it in this life, there's another one coming. Like, there's no sense of urgency the way there is to our human. Our higher self doesn't have that, right? They're like 20 minutes into first period of a school day. Like, it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm getting to be this old and I haven't. The actualization that we're afraid isn't happening is actually happening over the course of several lifetimes. And so while we feel like we've got to squeeze it all in, our higher self knows, like, we're going to go where we need to go. That's the path. There is no failure. There is no not getting to actualization. We just might not in this consciousness ever recognize it. And so what, right? It's like, does it matter? It's like the stock market. If you don't take your money out of the stock market, you didn't lose any. It's if you're sitting there and going, oh my gosh, I lost 20 bucks. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I got to take my money out. Well, now it's a problem. But if you look at your beingness in this body, but as well as in all of the other bodies that you're going to inhabit and have inhabited and are inhabiting right now, if you look at it from a quantum perspective, you're getting where you need to go.
Yes.
And so this is the opportunity to relax and look around and observe and be in the moment and enjoy the moment rather than trying to make the moment be something or make the moment perform to the way that you want it to, right?
That's exactly the crucial point that you're tapping into right now, because everything revolves around trusting in life. And we have issues with trusting in life because we have fears. I'm doing the human design and the gene keys, and we're talking about the shadow sides of all of the keys, and those are fears. And because we have all these different types of fears, and which specific fears are unique for most people, but they want us to take control over our lives, because somewhere we think that if we control everything, then we are ending up where we want to be, instead of just letting everything go and trusting that we will end up where we want to be and effortlessly flowing with whatever is happening. We get scared because we see that something that's happening is evidence of the fact that we should take a tighter control because we didn't control it enough. And now this happened, or things like that. So the whole core of this thing is trust.
Absolutely. 100%. Yes.
I love it. I've been really loving our talk, and I think we hit upon some really amazing points. And I can imagine that if you're watching and listening today, that you are very happy that you tuned in. So if that is the case, it would be amazing if you could share this episode with your followers, because if this was valuable to you, then chances are very high that this is also valuable to people that you know, even if you are not aware that this might be valuable for them. So please share it so that people that need to see it or need to listen to it will be able to. Thank you. And if you have questions or just want to share your story, just leave a comment. I promise to respond to each and every one of them personally. But I can also imagine that you're thinking, wow, I've been loving this dynamic and I want to talk more about it, or I might need some help with some things. So you know how to reach me, obviously, because you're following my channel. But how can we reach you, AmyLee? Where can we find you?
Oh, such a good question. Okay, so you've got a couple options. You can head to my Facebook group, which is called Design to Dream. You guys are welcome to join me there. And I have a website, AmyLeeWestervelt.com. And my Instagram is gratitude_and_glamour. So gratitude and glamour.
Awesome. Don't worry if you didn't catch it. It is in the show notes, either below or to the sides or somewhere around this video. I never know where they end up because it depends on the platform that you're watching or listening to this. But no worries, the links will be there. And feel free to reach out to myself, to AmyLee. We both would love talking with you and just seeing if we can help you in any way, or if we can connect you with other people that might be able to help you in any way. So don't hesitate to reach out if you feel called or if this resonates. I think that that's where I was going with this. And for right now, I want to thank you, listener, viewer, for being here, for your support for this show, for showing up and for listening to this entire interview. I love you and it's been an honor. And I want to thank you, AmyLee, for being here and for generously sharing your wisdom in such an awesome way.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So glad to be here. Thanks again for having me.
You're most welcome. So for right now, I have nothing else to say than thank you for being here and have an amazing rest of your day, and until next week.